What's up, guys? Welcome to Podcast 412, Fight for Purity. A bold way of looking at challenges that young people are facing. We'll talk about the naked truth of life and how to handle the problems you're thinking but not talking about. So strap in, get ready for another great podcast.
Alrighty, so we are going to, or I guess this is part 2 of the Art of Conversation, and I guess we're just gonna expand a little bit on parents connecting with their kids and kids connecting with their parents. Yeah.
In conversation.
No, just through eye contact.
Read the eyes.
So one of the things I think that I was kind of thinking about is just realizing, especially if you have a teenager, that, your teenagers, always have like this crisis, with their identity or just with friends, and that it's normal, like for them to struggle and for them to, just be at odds with their emotions and have all these different thoughts, and they're constantly like, there's like a lot of peer pressure now, to just be whatever. I don't know. That kind of sounds kind of dumb, but
No, it's like to be whatever's popular in that moment.
Yeah. And
Whatever
there's
you feel.
and there's so much more influence now. Kids today, they're not struggling with the things that I struggled with, for sure. And even, if you're like in your 20s, you're not even struggling with what kids in middle school and high school are struggling with. One of the things we talked about, like I grew up around TV. There was no cell phones. There was phones that were connected to the wall, but there was no cell phones. There was no social media. There was no, none of that was there. So I never had to deal with any of that. And then my 2 older kids, I think it was the whole MP3s and where phones just started to come out, but it was like the Nokia phones.
The minute you had minutes
Yeah, the
and after 9
minutes,
o'clock.
yeah. And you could only text. There was no screen like to see, anything. It was
Sometimes you didn't even have a camera.
yeah. So
If you didn't want to waste your minutes, you could only read the very beginning and hope that
Yeah.
was the whole conversation.
Yeah. So the big thing for them was texting. That was like the thing that I had to deal with and they had to deal with was texting and the whole music thing. And then my other kids was when all that social media started to come on, the whole Snapchat. I think, what was it, the first MySpace.
Because even then, for us, you had to have a telephone line and you had dial-up, and if you wanted to use a phone, you had to get off the internet.
Yeah.
And it took forever for anything.
That little sound.
Yeah. 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 It's just
So kids today, I think they're being exposed to things, man, that were unheard of. I mean, maybe 10 years ago. They're being exposed to like pornography. They're being exposed to drugs. They're being exposed to just all kinds of. Anything that you want to know about, is you're gonna find it on social media. Things that you don't even want to know about, you're gonna find on.
I remember when I was teaching, there was a video of, I think it's like when I can't remember what it was, but it was some terrorist group. I honestly don't remember who it was anymore because, they're everywhere now. There was a video going around of them chopping off some guy's head. And of course, it gets censored pretty fast, but kids nowadays, they're so good at getting around the blocks of like Wi-Fi, especially like at schools. They know how to get around all the blocks and everything so that they can still watch whatever they want to watch when they're not supposed to. But like they're telling me that they had watched this, and I was like, no, you shouldn't be watching that, for one. Well, miss. And then it went off on this whole thing about how they've seen things like that before in movies, and like, oh, they've heard worse, when we talk about like trying not to cuss in the classroom, because we're trying to create like this healthy environment, but cussing at each other all the time isn't extremely healthy. But like they're telling me all this stuff. And as like you said, it's because it's so accessible now. And I think one thing that sometimes we forget is that because it's so accessible, all the peer pressure at school isn't just at school anymore. It follows you home. Because, you know, before it was just like bullying, like physical bullying at the school, you know, or at the park, you know, if you decided to meet up after that, you know. But now it goes online and it follows your kids home. So if they're being bullied or if there's issues they're dealing with at school, it follows them home now. And if there's no connection and if there's no communication, you're not going to know that they're dealing with it all the time, not just when they're at school.
Well, even with like the videos, like how you said, like, you know, they saw it in like movies. It's like, well, that's a movie, you know, but they're becoming so desensitized because they're starting to show a lot more in movies, and like the effects are so real, but like it's like kind of like hard to differentiate. I can't say whatever. Yeah, it's a weird word, but I guess to like know the difference, I guess, to like they're out of touch with like reality, because like just because you see it in a movie and then they see it in a video clip, and
It's the same thing.
it's the same thing, but it's not the same thing. So I think just to, I don't know, it's just accessible, I guess.
And it's distorted too. You know, it's not like, and I think that's we've touched on that a few times. Like, you have to be able to separate like reality from fantasy. You know, and you see so much, and not just you see, but you hear so many things. Like, you hear just so many things. You hear about, you know, politics, religion, you know, philosophy. I mean, like anything, like just, you know, and then you hear that, and it's like, you know, how do you kind of slice through all that to
Well,
understand?
Even going back to what you were talking about, there's a pressure to be something, or maybe that you're not really that way, you know. And if parents aren't in touch with their kids, like, they're struggling by themselves, like in silence. Then if they're locked up in their rooms, or they're locked up, or the parents are gone, or, you know, like the demands of, you know, working and all that stuff is hard now. So if we don't take the time as parents to reach out to our kids, they suffer alone through all that stuff that we never had to experience, you know.
Yeah. So you have to like make connections with your kids. And one of the things I was saying earlier was that, you know, if you don't make a connection with your kids, then somebody else is, either through social media or some friend that's not a good influence. And, you know, one of the things I think is really important is for, you know, if you're a father and you have a daughter and a son, but I think especially like with daughters, you know, you have to make a connection with your daughters. You know, like, it's so important because you're like the first man in their life, you know. And so I feel like you have to make connections with them. And your kids, you have to create like an atmosphere for them to be able to like to talk to you, to be able to share, you know, what they're going through. You know, you might not see it as a big deal. You might not think, oh, well, you know, that's, you know, get over it, you know, just move on, you know, but, you know, you have to be able like to have those conversations and create a place for them to have conversations with you. And one of the things I said last week was that just eating together, just sitting at the table, and you know, I think you said how much time now?
There was like a study where kids are spending like face-to-face time with their parents 35 minutes a day. You know, that's not including cooking dinner, that's not including the showering time, any of that. And that might be like with little kids too, but even probably less with kids that are on social media or have like their phones with them all the time.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like 35 minutes a day, which is nothing. I mean,
Yeah, and like when you think about it, out of 24 hours a day, you only get 30 minutes. And if that's all the effort you're putting in, if you're only talking to that kid for 30 minutes, then who else is talking to your kid for the rest of the day? You know, because kids now, they don't sleep either. You know? You know, and I think it's like everything we're talking about things going home with them, and like the social media, is that like you need that connection. Because one thing to understand about kids want to talk. They want to share things with you. You know, as a teacher, there was 5 kids at a minimum in every single classroom, in a classroom of 30 kids at a bare minimum, who wanted to do nothing but talk to me about nothing either. It's like sometimes it's important, but sometimes they're just telling me about their day. They're telling me this, they're telling me that. They just want to talk. And it's like understanding that if they're craving that from me and they only see me, you know, for like an hour and a half a day, then it's missing from somewhere else in their life. And it's just understanding that they want that connection. They want to talk to you, and sometimes as parents we have to step out of our own comfort zone because we don't want to talk, you know, because we're tired, we're paying bills, we're working, we're, you know, trying to make sure there's food on the table, but understanding that there's still somebody else there who wants to share things with you, the good and the bad and the ugly, you know.
Yeah, and we only have a limited time with them, you know. And so now that my daughter is getting older, she's 13 now, sometimes like I'll ask her stuff and it's not that she's like she just pours out right away. Sometimes she doesn't want to say anything at all, you know. I have to kind of keep pushing, and it's not to, I know like it's like a whole thing of, oh, just give them their space or whatever, but like they need to talk. I mean, we all do, you know. I have friends that I go to and I need to decompress or whatever, and I'm, you know, almost going to be in my 30s, you know. I can't imagine them, you know. So sometimes it's just pushing through those barriers and talking, and eventually they open up, and then they find out, you know. And then if you just like back up, I feel like then they feel like, well, I'm a nuisance, or like I'm not worth the time, you know. And it might not be something that they say, but it's something you feel, you know, that you're bothersome. So when you push through those hard times of like, as a parent, if your kid doesn't want to talk, but if you push through, eventually they'll open up, and then over time, if you continue to do that, they'll come back a little bit more and feel comfortable talking with you. You know.
Yeah, and you have to create that. Like, they have to know, I think, that they can come and tell you, that they can tell you, you know, I'm struggling with this, or I'm struggling with that, you know. Because I know, like, especially being young, you always struggle with like fitting in, or you struggle with, you know, with the opposite sex, you know, with how you're perceived, you know, and you go through these phases where you're constantly measuring yourself against other people, or you feel lonely, or you feel like very insecure, you know, just all these different things. But your kids should be able to, you know, and even if they blow it, even if they mess up and they do something that they know isn't right, you know, or something that you don't approve of, they have to be able to come to you with that, you know. But hopefully they come to you and you can offer a way to help them. You can offer a solution, or something that will, you know, whatever they're struggling with, whatever that, you know, emotions or bullying or whatever, you know, because there's so many things that they go through that they're not going to tell you, you know. But if hopefully as you're talking to your kids, I know for me, I was trying to get to know my kids, trying to get to know like who they were, who their friends were, you know, what their struggles were, you know, what were they struggling with, you know. And that's the whole point of having a conversation and creating a connection with your kids, is that so that you can know who they are, and hopefully that they'll be open with you, you know. And food is a great motivator. So
yeah, even if you like take the time to go get an ice cream with them, or what I've been doing with my kids is one of them will help me make dinner, you know, and me just telling them like, hey, put this flour in here, do this, you know, like, then they're not only that, they're learning something, you know. And it's like bonding time. So it doesn't have to be like this great old thing where, you know, you're doing all these amazing, fantastic things, like dropping all this money. I think like even the kids enjoy, like, it's so cool for them to go get an ice cream cone, or go to Sonic, get a drink, or, you know, maybe even go for a drive or whatever, you know, or doing something that they like. Or my kids too, sometimes they do board games and stuff, but one of my kids is really competitive, so sometimes the other kids don't want to play with him because he gets really upset when he loses. So sometimes that's not a good thing, like for all of us to do together. But to even get to know your kids and their interests and what they like, and to do things maybe sometimes separate if you have multiple kids, like to find one thing to take an hour out of your day to do something that they enjoy, to get to know them. And then the whole navigating through problems. Like if you don't work with them through it or teach them how to, if it's something that they struggle with and it comes up again, they're not going to know how to handle it, and then they're not going to come to you again. And they're just, I mean, they'll try to find someone else to help them, or social media, or, you know, may not be the best advice, you know, just confuse them more or get them deeper into something else. So
go ahead, you guys can jump in
anytime.
No, I was just
I know
thinking,
you have thoughts.
I have no thoughts. No, I was just thinking, I guess as a kid and a parent. Well, yes, food helps. At least with me, I love food, so obviously. So that always was like an open door for me. Like, I got real comfy when I was eating. And even I had a friend, when we would argue, we wouldn't like yell at each other. We would literally, we'd eat our food, and we'd be like talking to each other like mad, but we'd be eating our food. But the problems, you know, they got solved, they got talked about, you know, because we had food, you know. And I guess it's just finding something that works for you and your family, or for you and that specific kid. It's finding something that can help them open up. And I guess as a kid too, it's gonna be weird. Like when you first started, especially if there's no communication right now, if there's no connection with your parents, it's gonna be weird, and it's gonna feel weird as a kid. If your parents constantly trying to talk to you, you're gonna get bugged because you feel like they're invading your space. But you know, like I guess just understanding that your parents are there to help you. You know, if you have, like, if you want like a healthy relationship with your parent, they're there to help you. They're not just trying to be all nosy, you know, and they're not just trying to cramp your style, you know, to make you so uncool, mom. But like they genuinely, they're concerned about you. And you know, and sometimes I think, like, for me, when people would ask me questions and I'd get bugged as a teenager and be like, stop talking to me, it wasn't because I didn't want to talk to them. It was more like I was, as like we said earlier, like I was kind of like scared to open up, because I was a little bit worried about how it was going to be taken, especially if I was struggling. Like, nobody wants to admit that we're having a hard time. You know, especially as a teenager, because we're always trying to live up to these standards of being cool or being accepted or being whoever it is that we're supposed to be, you know, at that age. It was that feeling of like, I felt like I couldn't always share it because I felt like I wasn't supposed to be struggling, almost like I should know who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing, because that's what people tell you sometimes you should know. And I'm like, I don't know. But I guess, like, as a kid, is understanding that if your parents are constantly trying to talk to you, it's because they're trying to create a connection. And later on, when you really are struggling, like when there's like those deep issues, there'll be somebody you can come to, and you don't, like you said, you don't have to go through it alone. Like, you're not supposed to go through those things alone. When you're trying to figure out who you are as a person, you're not supposed to do that by yourself. You know, you need help from other people. You need help to, like we were talking about, like in the past season, about like how we had that toilet garden, you know. Not everything in your garden is going to be just from you. It's going to be from other people, and a big part of that as a kid is going to be from your parents. They're going to be the ones, hopefully, putting good things in your life, trying to help you navigate, like you said, those problems and stuff. And so it's understanding that even though sometimes it feels like they're just crowding your space, it's a good thing, because we both have to be, we're going to be uncomfortable at first to create those connections. You know, connections, we don't just, you know, walk up to strangers, hey, let me tell you my deepest, darkest secrets. You know? Let me tell you all my problems. You know, it takes time, and it takes effort and hard work.
And if it's hard communicate, okay. If it's hard communicate, I just want to say, if it's hard communicating with your parents, I think I talked about it last season. Write a letter, you know, just expressing how you feel. Maybe you're not ready, or your parents aren't ready to, because sometimes our parents respond wrong. They just do. And so if, you know, write a letter and give it to them, you know, and maybe that'll open up the door for conversation. But
Yeah, because the one thing that I learned, or I had to learn growing up, is because I know sometimes, like how you said, parents can respond wrong. The one thing I learned growing up was understanding that, especially like knowing my mom's and my dad's background, just being grateful that they're trying not to repeat the bad decisions that they made, that, like, you know, that my grandpa or my grandma made. I had to learn that they're learning too, like how to be a parent. Like, and I know it kind of sucks as a kid to feel like, well,
They don't know what they're doing
they
either.
don't know what they're doing, you know. Like, I know it's easy to be like, well, they're the parent, they should know. But at the same time, if they didn't have good parents themselves, like if they didn't grow up in a good environment themselves, then they're navigating them, like, how to be a good parent. They're learning how to be affectionate. They're learning how to be, like, not to, because they have trauma too that they're working through. Like, and sometimes they didn't even realize that how it made them until they have kids. Sometimes they didn't realize, oh gosh, I'm not affectionate. until they have a kid who's all trying to like, you know, hug them and just talk to them all day. Or like you build all these defense mechanisms. Like I didn't realize that. Like obviously as a kid you don't realize that, but I think when you get older, then you see it. Especially when I see like when we would go to our family reunions and when we would, you know, or they would tell. That's a big thing is you telling your kid. You don't have to get all deep about your trauma, but like just knowing about the stories and the way that my parents grew up, it helped me understand like why they are the way they are. Like why sometimes they can be pretty like just don't know how to respond to me or like or freaked out that I have feelings like that helped me understand because I know sometimes parents try to shield their kids from their past, and I think there is a place for it, but there isn't at the same time. Like they need to know that where you came from and like understand that I'm trying as a parent to make sure that you don't have to go through what I did, and I'm having a hard time too. Like
Help me.
yeah, I don't know, because sometimes I don't think it's a bad thing to ask your kid like, how can I help you? Yeah. Like, do you want me to step away for a second and come back later, or do you want to talk about it now, or do you want to do this somewhere else, away from your siblings who are, you know, all nosy, listening to everything? yeah. Or like I think that's helpful too. So as a kid, just understand that your parents are at one time were in your shoes, and they probably had maybe a worse situation than what you have, and so they're learning themselves how to be a parent and how to be more affectionate and more open and how to respond more correctly. And so just keep that in mind that your mom and dad aren't perfect and they're learning too.
And then I think too, just even you realizing that it's a conversation. It shouldn't be an argument. Yeah. You know, I think even as a young person, you know, you can get defensive, you know, or you can want to argue, or, you know, you see in the movies, you know, I hate you, you know, or I wish I was never born. Yeah. You know, that's not a conversation, you know what I mean? So hopefully that even as a young person that you can hear at least, like you said, where your parents are coming from, you know, because, you know, it's not only uncomfortable for you, but it can be uncomfortable for the parent. Like you said, like I said, for me culturally, you know, we didn't talk, you know, we just did not talk. And so that's something that I had to learn to do, you know, like to actually have a conversation and be comfortable, you know. And it's not like I'm fully like, you know, okay, you know, but I think we all struggle through that, you know. And so just that, you know, we're all uncomfortable, so, you know. But
when you're first figuring it out.
Yeah, but I think you can. And it's not like you got to get into these deep, you know, long, drawn out, you know. Hopefully they can just share. And sometimes that's all they need to do. Is just tell you something, you listen, maybe give advice, maybe not, you know, but that's it. But sometimes that's all they need, you know. It's just they need to know that you're hearing them out, you know, and sometimes that just will solve whatever the issue is, you know. And so I think it's just understanding that it's a conversation, and like we were saying last week about, you know, you don't have to be yelling at each other and arguing with each other, you know, but listen. You know, you listen as a parent and listen as a child or as a young person, you know. So.
Yeah. And we'll have to stop there. So we'll see you guys next time on The Art of Conversation.
Yes. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Join us for our next podcast. You can contact us through Instagram at podcast412 or email us at 412fight@gmail.com. See you next time.